What happens here happens in many towns. The mafia.
Police found multiple dead bodies on that farm in Sicily. Did you kill him?
9 seconds. Do I look like a killer?
The Equalizer 3, Complete Analyses and Explanations. Beginning with analyses and explanations of the film, The Equalizer 3 positions Robert McCall's journey not as another chapter, but as a definitive conclusion. The narrative choice to place him in Altamonte, a serene coastal town in southern Italy, is the first crucial piece of character analysis. McCall is physically and spiritually wounded at the outset, seeking refuge. His discovery of the town's oppression by the Camorra, led by the Quaranta brothers, transforms a potential random stop into a deeply personal crusade. This shift from the impersonal justice of his past to a vested, emotional defense of a found family forms the core psychological motivation for his actions throughout the film. Delving into the thematic analysis, the pursuit of redemption and peace is handled with a profound maturity that differentiates this finale from its predecessors. In the first film, McCall's violence was a response to a specific injustice, reigniting his skills. The second film channeled that violence into the fury of personal revenge. Here, the analysis reveals that every tactical elimination is performed with the explicit, final goal of crafting a permanent sanctuary, not just for himself, but for the innocent community he has adopted. His violence is a means to secure a peace so complete that he can finally lay his burdens down. The baptismal symbolism present throughout the trilogy receives its most potent and literal expression in this installment. Analyses of the visual language highlight how storm and water imagery, previously representing McCall's brutal rebirth as the Equalizer, culminates in the film's climax. The juxtaposition of his final, cataclysmic act of violence with the town's religious procession and cleansing rain is a masterful piece of thematic storytelling. It frames his last stand as a dark sacrament, a necessary ritual of bloodshed to purify and protect his new home, allowing him to emerge, finally, as a man integrated into the world, not a specter haunting it. A critical explanation of the film's heart lies in its exploration of community versus individualism. Previous narratives showcased McCall as the ultimate lone wolf, intervening in the lives of individuals before disappearing. The foundational analysis of the Equalizer 3 rests on its deliberate dismantling of that very archetype. McCall's strength is no longer solely in his isolation, but in his connection. The town's refusal to betray him, and their brave, collective defiance against the mafia in the final act, signifies the ultimate success of his mission. He has not just protected them, he has empowered them. He becomes a symbol around which community solidarity coalesces. The parallel subplot featuring CIA agent Emma Collins is far more than a standard bureaucratic obstacle or ally. Explanations of this narrative thread must account for its deeply personal revelation. The analysis shows that McCall's anonymous tip is not just strategic. It is an act of mentorship and legacy, guiding the daughter of his late friend toward a major victory. This connection to Susan Plummer ties the film back to the emotional core of the first movie, suggesting McCall is consciously closing loops and ensuring the protection of his extended, chosen family before he departs. From a production analysis standpoint, the decision to film on location in Italy, specifically using the village of Atrani as Altamonte, is a character in itself. The sun-drenched piazzas, tight alleyways, and vibrant community life established through cinematography create a tangible paradise worth fighting for. This visual beauty makes the intrusions of the Camorra's brutal violence all the more jarring and morally clear, simplifying the ethical landscape and heightening the catharsis of McCall's interventions. Examining the franchise's evolution, a key explanation for the film's structure is its acceptance of familiar rhythms. It does not seek to radically reinvent McCall's methods, but to contextualize them within a final, emotionally resonant framework. The meticulous setup of the villains, the deliberate pacing of McCall's reconnaissance, and the crescendo of violent set pieces are all hallmarks of the series. But here they feel like a concluding symphony rather than a standalone piece. The analysis acknowledges the formula, but argues it is employed in service of a satisfying character conclusion. The critical and audience reception provides an external analysis of the film's success and limitations. The consensus that it offers cathartic action within a formulaic story underscores that the primary appeal is not novelty, but fulfillment. For fans invested in McCall's journey, the predictable plot mechanics are a vehicle for the much-anticipated emotional payoff. The quieter moments, McCall sharing coffee, learning Italian, simply sitting in the piazza, are often cited as the film's most powerful, as they visually represent the peace he has always been denied. Financially, the film's success as a hit franchise finale is a testament to the durable appeal of Denzel Washington's performance and the straightforward, wish-fulfillment premise. The analysis of its box office against its budget indicates a well-managed production that delivered exactly what its target audience desired: a competent, emotionally grounded, and visually stylish conclusion to a beloved character's story. The portrayal of the Quaranta brothers as villains warrants explanation. While perhaps lacking the memorable depth of some previous antagonists, an analysis from a thematic perspective reveals their purpose. They are not complex figures to be understood, but a force of nature, a pure corruption infesting a pristine setting. Their arrogance and casual cruelty serve to justify McCall's extreme methods and to galvanize both him and the community into unified opposition. They represent a generic evil that must be cleansed for the paradise to be restored. In explaining McCall's final state, the film offers a powerful resolution to his long-standing internal conflict. His retirement is not presented as an escape into solitude, but as an embrace of community. The final shots are of a man at rest, not hiding, but home. He is seen, known, and cherished by the people around him. This analysis confirms that his quest for atonement has found its answer not in endless violence, but in the creation and guardianship of a peaceful world, however small, finally allowing the Equalizer to become, simply, Robert McCall. The film's opening act provides an immediate and profound character study, revealing a vulnerable Robert McCall unlike any previous iteration. We witness a man physically broken and spiritually adrift, seeking solace far from his urban battlegrounds. His rescue by the kindly local doctor, Enzo, and subsequent integration into Altamonte's daily rhythms establish a new narrative foundation. This serene introduction deliberately contrasts the hyperviolence of his past, framing his recovery as a fragile opportunity for a different life. The community's effortless acceptance of this mysterious stranger speaks to their inherent goodness, a quality McCall instinctively feels compelled to preserve. Analyses of the inciting incident highlight how McCall's discovery of the Camorra's oppression transforms passive convalescence into active purpose. The extortion of a local fisherman or the intimidation of a shop owner are not abstract crimes to him. They are personal violations against the very people who showed him unconditional kindness. This personal stake differentiates the mission, morphing it from a professional intervention into a moral imperative. His unique skill set, once a burden representing a violent past, now becomes a tool for defending a future he desperately wants to belong to. The quiet fury he exhibits is thus born from love, not just a cold sense of justice. The introduction of the Quaranta brothers as antagonists is executed with a deliberate, chilling mundanity. Explanations of their villainy focus on their embedded, systemic cruelty rather than flamboyant personality. They do not see Altamonte as a community, but as a financial asset to be drained, representing a corrosive, institutional evil. Their power is portrayed as bureaucratic and omnipresent, making the townspeople's fear feel palpable and inescapable. This approach makes McCall's conflict less about a duel with charismatic rivals and more about dismantling an oppressive apparatus. Their lack of deep backstory ironically strengthens their thematic role as a pure, faceless threat to paradise. Parallel to this, the subplot featuring CIA agent Emma Collins is meticulously woven into the broader tapestry. Analysts note that her investigation into the transatlantic drug pipeline initially appears as a standard procedural thread. However, its true narrative function is one of legacy and connection. McCall's anonymous tip is a strategic masterstroke, using the might of a government agency to cripple the Comora's financial backbone from afar. This demonstrates his evolution from a hands-on operator to a strategic orchestrator, thinking several moves ahead on a global chessboard while protecting his local haven. The revelation of Collins' lineage as Susan Plummer's daughter is the emotional linchpin of this subplot. This disclosure recontextualizes all of McCall's interactions with her, adding a layer of paternal care and unspoken duty. It ties the trilogy together, suggesting McCall is safeguarding the next generation of those sworn to serve. His guidance becomes a passing of the torch, ensuring that the values he and Susan fought for endure. This relationship provides a crucial bridge between his isolated existence in Italy and the life he left behind, offering a sense of cyclical closure. Thematic exploration of redemption reaches its zenith in McCall's interactions with the townspeople. He does not present himself as a savior, but as a fellow citizen who has found something worth protecting. His redemption is earned not through confession, but through action undertaken for selfless reasons. The peace he seeks is visibly reflected in the gratitude and normalcy of those around him. Each meal shared, each Italian phrase clumsily learned, acts as a small stone building the foundation of his new identity. This slow-burn integration is the film's true heartbeat, making the threat of the Camorra feel all the more urgent. Baptismal symbolism is rendered with striking visual literacy throughout the film's runtime. The frequent Mediterranean storms are not merely atmospheric but metaphoric, washing over McCall as he plans or recovers from violence. Water becomes a constant motif of cleansing and transition. The climactic sequence, where a torrential downpour coincides with a religious festival and his final confrontation, is the culmination of this imagery. He moves through the violent, purging rain to emerge on the other side, bloodshed complete, into the calm of a secured dawn. This visual allegory frames his entire arc as a painful but necessary rebirth. Community as a source of strength forms the film's ideological core, a significant evolution from the franchise's earlier individualism. The moment the townspeople collectively choose silence over betrayal marks the narrative's turning point. Their defiance transforms them from victims into active participants in their own liberation. McCall's violence provides the catalyst, but their courage provides the moral authority. This solidarity illustrates that true security comes from mutual trust and collective resilience, a lesson McCall himself must learn to accept. He becomes their protector, but they, in turn, become his sanctuary and his reason to lay down his arms. Director Antoine Fuqua's stylistic choices receive considerable attention in any analysis of the film's impact. The decision to shoot in authentic Italian locales imbues every frame with a palpable sense of place. The camera lingers on sun-drenched cliffs, bustling market squares, and quiet courtyard gardens, establishing a tangible idyll. This beauty makes the intrusions of violence, a shattered window, a car burning on a scenic road, profoundly jarring. The cinematography doesn't just showcase a location. It argues for its preservation, making the audience viscerally understand what McCall is fighting to save. Robert Richardson's cinematography expertly manipulates light and shadow to reflect the internal and external conflict. Interiors are often warm, bathed in golden lamp light, representing safety and community. The nighttime sequences where McCall operates are all cold blues and stark, high-contrast shadows, representing the world of threat and his own lethal professionalism. This visual dichotomy elegantly externalizes McCall's journey between the warm community he desires and the dark work required to secure it. The lighting tells a parallel story of a man straddling two worlds. The film's pacing represents a conscious narrative gamble, valuing atmosphere and character over relentless action. Long stretches are dedicated to McCall simply observing, learning, and connecting. This slower rhythm allows the stakes to become deeply emotional rather than purely physical. When violence does erupt, it is brief, brutal, and efficient, mirroring McCall's own methodology. This pacing reinforces the film's thesis that the quiet moments of life are the ultimate prize, and the action sequences are the unfortunate, violent costs of securing them. Critical reception often centered on the performance of Denzel Washington, which is universally acknowledged as the franchise's anchor. His portrayal in this chapter is more subdued, layered with a palpable weariness and a glimmer of hope. The gravitas he brings to silent moments, a glance, a slight smile, communicates volumes about McCall's internal state. He embodies a man who has seen too much but has found a reason to hope for more. This performance elevates the material, grounding the familiar plot mechanics in a profound and convincing humanity. Audience reception frequently praised the film's satisfying sense of closure, a rarity in franchise filmmaking. Viewers invested in McCall's journey appreciated the narrative's commitment to providing a definitive, emotionally resonant endpoint. The finale does not tease future adventures, but firmly closes the book, allowing the character to rest. This respectful conclusion was seen as a strength, providing catharsis and a farewell that felt earned. The predictable elements of the plot were forgiven in light of the powerful emotional payoff and the dignified farewell to a beloved character. Financial success can be partly attributed to this clear marketing as a final chapter, drawing audiences for a last visit with a reliable character. The film delivered precisely on its promise, a stylized, thoughtful, and action-packed conclusion that prioritized character resolution over sequel baiting. Its profitability on a sensible budget demonstrates the enduring appeal of well-executed, character-driven action dramas for an adult audience. It proved that a franchise can end on its own terms successfully, without requiring an open-ended setup for future installments. The score by composer Marcelo Zarvos also merits analysis for its role in shaping the film's tone. The music interweaves traditional Italian melodies with the series' familiar, tense electronic motifs. This fusion sonically represents McCall's integration into his new environment. The gentle, acoustic themes associated with Altamonte gradually become more prominent, eventually overtaking the darker, pulsating themes of his vigilantism in the final scenes. This musical journey subtly underscores his transition from a man of war to a man of peace. Examinations of the action choreography reveal a progression in style that mirrors McCall's physical state. Early confrontations are slower, more labored, showing the toll of his injury and age. He relies even more on precision, anticipation, and the strategic use of environment over raw physical prowess. This realistic approach makes his victories feel earned and reinforces his vulnerability. The action serves character, reminding us that this is likely his last campaign, fought not with boundless energy, but with perfected skill and overwhelming purpose. The film's costume design acts as a subtle but effective narrative device. McCall's wardrobe slowly evolves from the generic, dark traveler's clothes of an outsider to lighter fabrics and colors that blend with the locals. By the film's end, he is dressed as any other resident, a visual confirmation of his assimilation. This sartorial journey is a nonverbal testament to his changing identity, symbolically shedding the uniform of the lone vigilante for the attire of a community member. Supporting characters, while not deeply complex, are crafted with specific functions that serve the theme. The Dr. Enzo represents healing and unconditional acceptance. The young waiter Marco represents the future of the town that must be protected. The principled but fearful mayor represents the moral compromise that McCall's presence helps overcome. Each resident is a facet of the community McCall cherishes, giving the threat a human face and making the stakes universally relatable beyond the protagonist's personal safety. The structure of the Camorra's downfall is a case study in McCall's tactical genius, analyzed as a deliberate, multi-phase campaign. He first gathers intelligence, then anonymously triggers a federal investigation to disrupt their logistics, sows discord within their ranks, and finally, confronts the leadership on his chosen ground. This methodical approach shows a master tactician at work, using every tool at his disposal, cyber, psychological, and physical. It is the culmination of his lifetime of skills, applied not for a client, but for a cause he holds dear. Philosophical underpinnings about violence and peace are deeply interrogated. The film does not shy away from the contradiction that McCall must commit extreme violence to create a space free from it. This paradox is at the heart of his character. The narrative ultimately suggests that his violence is a sacrificial, one-time purge, a surgical removal of a cancer to allow the healthy body of the community to thrive. His retirement is the essential completion of this moral equation. To continue would make him the very perpetuator of violence he seeks to eradicate. Comparisons to the Western genre, specifically the archetype of the gunfighter seeking retirement, are particularly Apartment Altamonte is his peaceful ranch, the Camorra the outlaws who threaten it, and he is the seasoned fighter who must do one last job to secure his peace. The film embraces this mythic structure, lending McCall's journey a timeless, almost fable-like quality. It positions him as a classic American archetype, but one resolved within the specific, sun-bleached beauty of the Italian coast, creating a compelling cultural fusion. The role of food and shared meals cannot be overstated in the film's relational storytelling. Every significant bond is forged or strengthened over coffee, wine, or a home-cooked meal. These scenes are the antithesis of the action sequences. They are about communion, trust, and the simple joys of life. They visually represent what is at stake, the everyday warmth of human connection. McCall's participation in these rituals marks his true healing, moving from a man who watches from the shadows to one who sits at the table. Antoine Fuqua has stated that the trilogy forms a complete arc about a man finding his humanity. This final film is the conclusive argument of that thesis. Every directorial choice, from the languid pacing to the explosive violence to the final, quiet scenes, is in service of demonstrating McCall's reclamation of a soul he feared was lost. The director's hand is assured, prioritizing this character resolution over spectacle for its own sake, trusting that the audience's investment in McCall's fate is the greatest special effect. The film's final moments provide the ultimate explanation of its entire thematic pursuit. McCall is not shown leaving or preparing for another mission. He is simply present, reading a book in the sunny piazza, nodding to neighbors, fully at rest. He is no longer the equalizer in posture or purpose. He is Robert McCall, a man who belongs. This image is the perfect, wordless culmination of his three-film journey. A journey from a solitary ghost in a diner to a man finally, peacefully home. It is an ending that resonates because it fulfills the deepest wish for a character who has given so much and asked for so little in return. The concluding chapter of this action trilogy masterfully recontextualizes its protagonist's entire existence, framing his lethal skill set not as a curse but as a final gift for a chosen family. This narrative pivot from urban vigilantism to rural protection introduces a poignant layer of sacrifice, where violence is the bitter price paid for lasting peace. The film's visual poetry contrasts starkly with its brutal set pieces, suggesting that beauty and terror are two sides of the same coin in McCall's world. His journey toward assimilation is meticulously charted through subtle gestures and growing linguistic comfort, signaling a soul learning to inhabit a new skin. Each interaction with the villagers is a thread woven into a tapestry of belonging, making the threat of the Camorra an assault on his very identity. Exploration of the antagonist's methodology reveals a deliberate contrast to McCall's personal code. The Camorra operates through faceless intimidation and economic suffocation. Their evil is bureaucratic, making their defeat require systemic dismantling rather than mere physical confrontation. McCall's strategy evolves accordingly, targeting their financial pipelines and corrupt alliances with precision. This intellectual warfare demonstrates his growth from a hands-on enforcer to a strategic grandmaster, manipulating events from the shadows. The involvement of international agencies becomes an extension of his will, showcasing an understanding of power that transcends brute force. His campaign is a multi-front war fought in cyber cafes, bank records, and whispered confidences as much as in dark alleyways. Cinematic language is employed with remarkable consistency to mirror the internal transformation of the protagonist. The color palette gradually warms, shifting from the cool, steely blues of the opening to the golden, sun-drenched hues of the finale. Camera movements become less frantic and more observational, mirroring McCall's shift from hunter to guardian. The sound design meticulously differentiates between the diegetic sounds of community life and the heightened, almost surreal audio of his violent interventions. This sensory dichotomy reinforces the central conflict between the life he has and the work he must do to keep it. The film itself becomes a meditation on perception, forcing the audience to see this world through McCall's newly hopeful, yet eternally vigilant eyes. Psychological underpinnings are explored with a nuanced understanding of trauma and recovery. McCall's physical wound becomes a metaphor for a deeper spiritual injury that only altruistic connection can heal. His reluctance to fully engage at first speaks to a fear of losing this newfound peace, a classic trauma response of avoidance. The community's persistent kindness acts as a gentle, persistent therapy, dismantling his defenses brick by brick. His eventual, full commitment to their defense represents not a regression to violence, but a progression toward empowered selflessness. He fights not because he is broken, but because he has found something whole worth breaking for. The thematic resonance of the title itself undergoes a final evolution in this installment. The Equalizer no longer refers solely to a man balancing scales of justice, but to the restorative balance he brings to a destabilized ecosystem. He equalizes the power disparity between the oppressed townspeople and the predatory syndicate. More profoundly, he equalizes his own internal ledger, offsetting a lifetime of violence with an ultimate act of communal creation. The film posits that true equilibrium is not a state of passive peace, but the active, sustained maintenance of harmony against entropy. McCall becomes the living embodiment of this principle, a human fulcrum upon which the fate of paradise rests. Narrative symmetry with the first film is achieved through meticulous callback and reversal. Where the original film began with McCall alone in a diner, this one ends with him surrounded by life in a piazza. His mentor role, once directed at a young prostitute, is now directed at a CIA agent and an entire village. The tools of his trade, once mundane objects in a hardware store, are now the very landscape and traditions of Altamonte. This structural mirroring provides a profound sense of closure, illustrating a journey from chaos to order, from isolation to integration. The trilogy is revealed as a perfectly engineered dramatic arc, with each film serving as an essential act in a grander tragedy that ultimately bends toward grace. Cultural commentary is seamlessly woven into the fabric of the story, examining the clash between globalized crime and localized identity. The Camorra represents a rootless, parasitic form of capitalism, extracting value without enriching the culture. McCall, the ultimate outsider, ironically becomes the defender of a deeply rooted, traditional way of life. The film argues that preservation requires both the steadfastness of the locals and the specific, external skills McCall provides. It is a nuanced take on interventionism, suggesting that aid is only righteous when it is requested, needed, and directed toward empowering, not displacing the community. The victory is not McCall's alone. It is a fusion of his capability and their unwavering spirit. Philosophical inquiries into the nature of retirement for a man of action are treated with unprecedented depth. Retirement here is not depicted as inactivity, but as a transfer of energy from destruction to preservation. McCall's work shifts from ending lives to cultivating life, a far more demanding and rewarding challenge. The film suggests that for such a man, peace is not a passive state to be received, but an active condition to be built and defended daily. His final stand is therefore not his last job, but the foundational act of his new vocation as a citizen. This redefinition gives his character a path forward that feels both earned and endlessly sustainable. The role of memory and the past is handled with a graceful, non-expositional heaviness. McCall's history is not recounted in dialogue, but is carried in Washington's weary posture and the cautious way he assesses spaces. The ghosts of Susan Plummer and others are palpable in his determination to guide Emma Collins correctly. The town of Altamonte, in its timelessness, offers a form of amnesia, a chance to exist in a perpetual, beautiful present. His battle is thus also a fight for his own right to forget, to let the past recede into the haze of the Mediterranean sun. By securing the town's future, he finally secures his own release from history. Technical craftsmanship in the action sequences emphasizes consequence over spectacle. Every gunshot echoes with shocking loudness. every impact conveys a brutal physics. The editing refuses to glamorize the violence, often holding on the painful aftermath rather than the stylish strike. This aesthetic choice grounds the film in a tangible reality, making the threat feel authentic and McCall's interventions feel necessary, not cool. The choreography is less about fluidity and more about efficient, desperate problem-solving. He is not a superhero, but a very dangerous man using every advantage in a fight for survival, and the film's style never lets you forget that mortal stakes. Examination of the supporting characters reveals a network of symbolic functions that bolster the central theme. The local priest represents the spiritual sanctuary McCall unknowingly seeks. The fisherman embodies the direct connection to nature and honest labor that McCall's previous life lacked. Even the smallest roles, like the grocer or the elderly woman on the bench, serve as avatars for the normalcy he covets. They are not merely victims to be saved, but living arguments for a better way of life. Their collective courage in the third act is the ultimate validation of his sacrifice, proving that his defense of them was a defense of something genuinely noble and resilient. The film's treatment of time is a masterclass in pacing and mood. Scenes of tranquil daily life are allowed to breathe, creating a reservoir of calm that the violent sequences then aggressively drain. This push and pull manipulate the audience's emotional state, making them crave the return to peace as fervently as McCall does. The narrative time is compressed, covering only a few weeks, yet it conveys a lifetime of change through subtle accumulations. The lingering shots on McCall's face as he watches a family or hears laughter track the gradual melting of his interior ice. Time in this film is the agent of his healing. Conceptual foundations in the classic hero's journey are both adhered to and subverted. McCall answers a new call to adventure, but this time the call is to stay, not to leave. His road of trials is internal as much as external, confronting his own capacity for attachment. His approach to the innermost cave is literalized in the Comora's fortified compound. His apotheosis is not a seizure of power, but a relinquishing of his weapon. His return with the elixir is the gift of security he bestows upon the village. The film cleverly uses this mythic structure to tell a story that feels both epic and intimately human. Audience positioning is carefully managed to align our perspective with McCall's evolving viewpoint. Early on, we see Altamonte as a postcard, beautiful but distant. As he learns names and stories, so do we, investing us emotionally in its preservation. The violence is shot not for thrill, but from a perspective of tactical necessity, making us complicit in his grim work. By the climax, we are fully aligned with the villagers, watching not a vigilante, but our protector, face the threat. This shared journey from observer to community member is the film's most sophisticated narrative accomplishment, bonding the viewer irrevocably to the protagonist's cause. The final image of the film is a thesis statement in visual form. McCall, seated in the piazza, is not positioned as a statue or a sentry, but as a participant. He is reading, act of quiet intellectual engagement. He is available, making eye contact and sharing nods. He is unarmed. The sunlight hits him fully, no longer casting the long shadows of his former life. This composition tells us everything we need to know. The mission is over, the man remains, and he is finally, unequivocally home. It is a perfect, wordless epilogue that resonates with a profound and hard-won serenity. The film's geographical and emotional setting acts as a profound catalyst for the narrative's central themes. Altamonte is not a random backdrop, but a character in its own right, representing an ancient, rhythmic way of life that stands in direct opposition to McCall's history of urban chaos. The town's very structure, with its maze of narrow staircases and secluded courtyards, mirrors the internal complexity McCall must now navigate. This environment demands a different kind of awareness, one based on community observation rather than threat assessment, forcing a fundamental rewiring of his instincts. The serene pace of life, governed by tides and traditions, becomes a therapeutic counterpoint to the adrenaline-fueled reactivity of his past. McCall's initial state of convalescence is portrayed with a raw physicality that underscores his vulnerability. His reliance on Dr. Enzo is a reversal of his typical role as the protector, establishing a necessary humility at the start of his arc. This period of forced passivity allows him to become a witness rather than an actor, seeing the town's beauty and its hidden fractures with fresh eyes. The slow healing of his body runs parallel to the gradual awakening of his protective instincts, now filtered through a lens of personal gratitude rather than abstract duty. His wound, therefore, becomes the doorway to his redemption, a tangible price already paid that justifies the violence to come. The Camorra's oppression is depicted with a chilling, mundane realism that amplifies its horror. Their control is not shown through overt, dramatic acts of terrorism, but through a pervasive atmosphere of resigned fear. A missed payment, a whispered threat, a truck blocking a shop entrance. These are the tools of their trade. This approach makes their evil feel insidious and inescapable, a slow poison in the town's veins. It frames McCall's intervention not as a response to a single catastrophic event, but as a surgical removal of a chronic disease. The conflict is thus defined as one of public health, with McCall as the specialist called in for a delicate, terminal operation. Emma Collins' subplot functions as a crucial tether to the wider world and McCall's institutional legacy. Her investigation provides the macro view of the Camorra's operations, contrasting with McCall's micro-level defense of Altamonte. The film cleverly uses her digital, intelligence-driven methodology as a foil to his analog, physical presence. Her success, facilitated by his anonymous guidance, validates the idea that his legacy is secure in capable hands. The personal connection to Susan Plummer transforms this professional courtesy into a sacred trust, allowing McCall to perceive a lineage where his knowledge and ethics are passed forward, absolving him of the need to carry the mantle himself indefinitely. Symbolism extends beyond water to encompass the very land and architecture. The steep cliffs represent both the town's beautiful isolation and its precarious vulnerability. The ancient stone walls of the buildings symbolize the resilience of the community, while also providing the perfect acoustic landscape for whispers and threats to echo. McCall's movement from the periphery of the town, looking down from high paths, to its very center in the piazza, charts his integration visually. The final confrontation often takes place in transitional spaces, doorways, bridges, stairwells, symbolizing McCall's own role as a gatekeeper between the community and the threat that seeks to invade it. The film's dialogue is notably sparse, especially for McCall, placing greater weight on action, reaction, and silence. When he does speak, it is often to ask questions or offer simple, direct statements of fact. This linguistic economy reflects a man who has moved beyond the need for justification or exposition. His communication with the villagers grows through gesture and shared activity rather than conversation, a universal language of belonging. In contrast, the Camorra members are often verbose in their threats, their words revealing a hollow arrogance that McCall's silent competence will dismantle. The power dynamic is communicated through who speaks and who acts. Costuming choices offer a meticulous visual narrative of assimilation. Denzel Washington's McCall begins in layered, dark, urban attire that seems out of place in the Mediterranean light. As the film progresses, these layers are shed. Jackets are removed, colors lighten, fabrics become more relaxed and breathable. By the end, his wardrobe is indistinguishable from that of the local men, a visual surrender to the environment. This sartorial journey is a nonverbal confession of his desire to belong, an attempt to physically wear his new identity until it fits. It is a subtle but powerful testament to the character's internal shift. The score's evolution mirrors the protagonist's journey from dissonance to harmony. Early scenes are underscored with the familiar, minimalist electronic pulses that have defined McCall's operational mode, reflecting his isolation and latent tension. As he connects with Altamonte, traditional Italian instruments, an acoustic guitar, a mandolin, begin to weave into the musical tapestry. In the finale, these folk melodies ultimately subsume the electronic tones, achieving acoustic dominance in the very moments of climax and resolution. The soundtrack itself becomes a story of cultural integration, with McCall's theme finally finding a home within the region's musical tradition. Exploration of McCall's tradecraft reveals a man adapting his skills to a new environment. He utilizes the town's geography, narrow alleyways, rooftop accesses, crowded festivals, to his advantage, turning the Camorra's unfamiliarity with the terrain against them. His methods show an understanding of psychological warfare, striking not just at men, but at their sense of invincibility. He leaves messages, creates unexplained disruptions, and sows paranoia, effectively turning their own tactics of fear back upon them. This campaign is as much about dismantling their myth of control as it is about physical elimination, demonstrating a holistic approach to conflict. The relationship between violence and craftsmanship is a recurring motif. McCall's actions are not presented as brawls, but as applications of a terrible expertise, each movement precise and economical. This frames his violence as a dark art form, a skill honed to perfection and now applied for a singular, righteous purpose. The film draws a clear distinction between his disciplined, defensive violence and the Camorra's brutish, offensive aggression. This distinction is moral and aesthetic. One is the scalpel, the other is the bludgeon. McCall's final act is the ultimate masterpiece of this grim craft, after which the tools can be retired. Thematic undercurrents about debt and payment are woven throughout the narrative. McCall perceives his life as a debt owed to the people who saved him, and his mission is the repayment. This transforms his violence from a choice into an obligation, a necessary transaction to balance the scales of kindness. The townspeople, however, never see it as a transaction, which is what ultimately grants him absolution. Their gift of community was given freely, and his protection is his gift in return, not a payment. This silent agreement forms the bond of the film, a cycle of giving that finally frees McCall from the ledger of his past. The use of light, particularly in interior scenes, paints a portrait of safety and threat. The homes and the cafe are bathed in warm, low, amber light from lamps and candles, creating pockets of sanctuary in the night. The Camorra spaces are lit with harsh, fluorescent, or cold blue light, emphasizing their sterile menace. McCall often moves from one pool of warm light to another through zones of darkness, visually charting his role as a connector of safe havens. The climactic sequences masterfully play with this, as lightning and gunfire provide strobe-like illumination, reducing the world to stark, binary moments of action and consequence. Narrative tension is derived less from whether McCall will succeed, and more from the cost of that success to his newfound peace. The audience understands his capabilities. The suspense lies in whether using them will poison the well of his new life. Each violent act risks exposing the monster he fears still resides within him, potentially alienating the very people he wants to join. This internal conflict, the gambler using his skill to win a life where that skill is obsolete, provides a profound psychological stakes. The victory is hollow if it requires him to become, permanently, the equalizer once more. The film's treatment of food and ritual serves as the primary engine of community bonding. The daily rituals of espresso, the shared meals, the festival preparations are the sacraments of this secular society. McCall's gradual participation, from watching, to being served, to finally preparing coffee for others, is his rite of passage. These acts are the antithesis of violence. They are about nurturing, sharing, and sustaining life. By defending these rituals, he defends the soul of the town. His final, quiet participation in them post-conflict is the true sign of his victory, signifying that the rituals and his place within them have survived the storm. In examining the antagonist's perspective, the Quaranta brothers are portrayed as symptomatic of a larger decay. They are not visionary criminals, but entitled heirs to a corrupt system, more concerned with revenue streams and respect than any grand ambition. Their failure to understand McCall is their fatal flaw. They see him as a problem to be managed, not a force of nature to be avoided. This arrogance blinds them to the fundamental truth he represents, that some lines, when crossed, summon an immutable response. They represent a world ruled by transactional cruelty, unable to comprehend a man motivated by sacrificial love. The architectural and ambient soundscape is a critical, often unnoticed character. The constant sound of the sea provides a rhythmic, timeless backdrop against which the human drama plays out. The echoes in the stone piazza, the chatter from open windows, the bells from the church tower. These sounds build the auditory reality of a living, interconnected community. The intrusion of harsh modern sounds, the squeal of tires, the blast of a shotgun, is thus profoundly jarring. The restoration of the natural ambient soundscape at the film's end is as much a return to normalcy as any visual cue, a symphony of peace regained. McCall's mentorship of Emma, though largely conducted from afar, reveals his philosophical approach to their shared profession. He doesn't give her answers. He gives her a direction and trusts her skill to find the path. This reflects his belief in competence and integrity over blind obedience. His tips are designed to make her agency more effective, not to make her his puppet. This respectful distance acknowledges her autonomy while honoring her mother's legacy. It is the act of a man confident enough to empower others, signaling that he no longer needs to be the sole solution to every injustice. The concept of home, is deconstructed and rebuilt over the course of the narrative. For McCall, home has always been an abstract concept, a memory, a moral code, a diner at night. Altamonte offers a tangible sensory definition. The smell of salt and coffee, the feel of sun-warmed stone, the sound of specific voices. His fight is to translate this sensory experience into a permanent reality. The film argues that home is not where you are from, but what you are willing to defend. By choosing to defend Altamonte, he finally chooses a home, and in doing so, chooses a self. The film's pacing in the third act masterfully shifts from methodical preparation to irreversible commitment. The quiet planning stages give way to a cascade of actions that McCall can no longer control or contain, forcing the conflict into the open. This narrative momentum mimics the point of no return in any war, where strategy dissolves into the chaos of execution. The editing becomes more percussive, the shots shorter, reflecting the fragmentation of his careful plans. Yet, within this chaos, his calm center holds, guiding him through the storm he has unleashed to clear the skies for tomorrow. Ultimately, The Equalizer 3 transcends its genre trappings to become a poignant meditation on the end of a certain kind of strength. It is about the retirement of the warrior, not into irrelevance, but into a more demanding role, that of the citizen. The film posits that the highest use of a lifetime of combat skills is to create a world where those skills are no longer needed. McCall's legacy is not the bodies he left behind, but the living, breathing community that continues its daily rhythms in the sun, forever unaware of the precise cost of their peace. He achieves the ultimate victory for a man of his nature, to become quietly, gloriously ordinary. The cinematic language of the film masterfully employs contrast as its foundational principle, juxtaposing the serene timelessness of the Italian coast with the precise, modern brutality of McCall's methods. This visual dialectic creates a tension that is both aesthetic and philosophical, asking the audience to consider the price of beauty in a fallen world. The lingering shots of ancient cobblestones, soon to be stained with blood, serve as a silent commentary on the perpetual intrusion of chaos into order. McCall himself becomes the embodiment of this contrast, a figure of ultramodern violence operating within a landscape that has resisted change for centuries. His presence is an anomaly that the narrative must either expel or absorb for equilibrium to be restored. Psychological depth is achieved through the exploration of McCall's relationship with his own body, now a site of both vulnerability and weaponized memory. The recovery from his wound is not a linear process, but a series of small, painful victories that mirror his emotional thawing. Each regained degree of motion represents a step away from the spectral figure of the Equalizer and towards a corporeal, feeling human being. His physical therapy, often shown in quiet moments, becomes a metaphor for the rebuilding of a soul. The Camorra's threat, therefore, is not just to the town but to this fragile process of rehabilitation, promising to return him to a state of brokenness both physical and spiritual that he is only beginning to transcend. The social fabric of Altamonte is presented as an intricate, self-sustaining ecosystem where every individual has a defined role and value. McCall's initial status as an observer allows him to map this social cartography, understanding not just who people are, but how they connect. His defense of the town is thus a defense of this delicate web of relationships, a recognition that harming one thread threatens the integrity of the whole tapestry. His interventions are strategically designed to protect key nodes within this network: the doctor, the communicator, the laborer, understanding that the community's strength is distributive, not centralized. This approach showcases a tactical intelligence that values social cohesion as the ultimate strategic asset. Narrative irony is woven throughout the film's structure, most notably in the fact that McCall's salvation comes from being perceived as weak and needing care. This perceived vulnerability is what grants him immediate, unconditional entry into the community's heart, a privilege his strength and competence in Boston never afforded. The very injury that nearly killed him becomes his greatest social asset, disarming suspicion and inviting compassion. This ironic reversal forces him to receive before he can give, to be saved before he can save, establishing a foundational humility that redefines his entire mission. His subsequent protection of the town becomes an act of grateful reciprocity, not arrogant paternalism. The film's treatment of sound extends beyond ambience to become a tool of psychological warfare and sensory immersion. The absence of a traditional, manipulative score during key moments of violence forces the viewer to sit with the stark, ugly reality of the act. The gasp, the thud, the finality of silence. Conversely, the vibrant diegetic sounds of the festival, the music, laughter, clinking glasses, create a wall of life that the violence seeks to penetrate. McCall's acute auditory awareness, a skill honed in his previous life, is retrained to listen for the discordant note within this symphony of peace, the threat hidden within the celebration. His final act is as much about silencing a wrong note as it is about eliminating a man. Thematic parallels are drawn between McCall's craftsmanship and the traditional artisanship of the village. The fisherman mending his nets, the cook preparing a meal, the mason repairing a wall. All are shown performing their tasks with a quiet, practiced expertise. McCall's meticulous planning and execution are framed as a dark mirror of this same ethos. A professional applying his unique skill to maintain and repair the social order. This parallel legitimizes his violence within the film's moral universe, positioning it not as mindless brutality, but as a necessary, specialized trade employed in defense of a way of life built upon similar principles of care and precision. The concept of borders, physical, moral, and psychological, is rigorously examined. Altamonte is a bordered space, defined by cliffs and sea, a fact that makes both its sanctuary and its vulnerability possible. The Camorra represents the violation of these borders, their influence seeping in like a toxin. McCall operates as a living border guard, a human barrier who decides what may enter and what must be repelled. Internally, he is navigating the border between his past and future selves, deciding which traits of the Equalizer to bring across into his new life. The film's climax is about the violent reinforcement of a boundary, the drawing of a definitive line that cannot be crossed. The use of reflective surfaces, windows, water, mirrors, serves as a persistent visual motif forcing characters and the audience to confront duality. McCall often sees the town reflected in glass, a beautiful image separated from him by a barrier he has yet to cross. His own reflection in a shop window might show the tired face of a convalescent superimposed over the vibrant life inside. These moments visually articulate his status as an outsider looking in, a ghost not yet fully materialized into the world he desires. As the film progresses, these reflective barriers diminish. He is seen within spaces, not outside looking at their reflections, signaling his gradual integration. Temporal disorientation is a subtle tool used to convey McCall's shifting state of mind. In the early acts, time feels elongated, measured in sunrises and sunsets, in the slow routines of recovery. This creates a dreamlike, suspended quality, as if he has stepped outside the stream of his own violent history. As the threat escalates, time compresses, becomes frantic, measured in heartbeats and the swift execution of plans. The editing rhythm itself accelerates, pulling both McCall and the viewer back into the urgent tempo of his former life. The resolution seeks to restore the elongated, peaceful sense of time, suggesting he has earned his way back into the slow, rewarding time of community. The morality of the film is refreshingly absolute, yet this absolutism is earned through the careful construction of its world. The Camorra is given no tragic backstory, no mitigating circumstances. They are greed and cruelty incarnate. This narrative choice is not laziness, but a philosophical stance. It presents a form of evil that is purely corrosive, that justifies a total, uncompromising response. McCall is not battling a nuanced antagonist with whom he might find some common ground. He is excising a malignancy. This moral clarity harks back to classic myth and Western structures, providing a solid ethical foundation upon which the cathartic violence can rest without moral queasiness. McCall's interaction with technology presents a fascinating subtext about modernity and tradition. He uses a burner phone and anonymous digital tips to guide Emma, tools of his old life, but his primary work in Altamonte is profoundly analog. He gathers intelligence through observation and conversation, not hacking. His weapons are often repurposed objects from the environment, not high-tech gadgets. This signifies that his final battle is not against a digital specter or global conspiracy, but against a tangible, local, human evil. It is a return to the most fundamental form of conflict, fought with wits, will, and an intimate knowledge of the terrain, both geographical and human. The film subtly explores the economics of violence and peace. The Camorra's model is extractive. They take wealth and security, leaving fear and poverty. McCall's service, by contrast, is purely philanthropic. He invests his human capital, his skill and risk, with no expectation of financial return. His currency is safety, his dividend the peace to enjoy a cup of coffee undisturbed. This economic metaphor reframes his actions as the ultimate rejection of transactional living. He operates in a gift economy with the town, an exchange of priceless commodities, life, safety, belonging, that exists outside and above the Camorra's grubby calculus of extortion and profit. Lighting transitions within individual scenes often mirror internal shifts. A conversation might begin in the soft, ambiguous light of dusk, progress under the harsh, revealing glare of an overhead bulb as tensions rise, and conclude in the warm, forgiving glow of a table lamp as understanding is reached. This choreography of light visually externalizes the emotional and psychological journey of the characters within the scene. McCall's face is often partially shadowed early on, his eyes hidden, but as he opens up, more of his face is shown in full light, a visual correlate of decreasing defensiveness and increasing emotional availability. The role of animals, a stray cat, the fishing boat's catches, birds in the piazza, is not incidental. They represent the natural order of the town, a world operating on instinct and simple need. McCall's quiet affinity for these creatures, a moment spent observing a cat, underscores his own desire for a life governed by simpler, more natural rhythms. The violence of the Camorra is an affront to this natural order. It is a disruptive, unnatural force. McCall's violence, in its precise, predatory efficiency, is portrayed as almost a force of nature itself, a hurricane or a cleansing fire, restoring balance by removing the unnatural element. The film's conclusion is powerful precisely because it refuses a heroic spectacle. There is no medal, no speech, no recognition from the wider world. The victory is intimate and practical. The trucks stop coming, the threats cease, the fear lifts from people's faces. McCall's reward is not fame, but anonymity, not glory, but the profound ordinariness of being just another man in the square. This defines a truly mature vision of heroism, where the greatest success is rendering one's own extraordinary services obsolete, fading into the peaceful background of a world made whole. The final image is of a man who has not just won a fight, but successfully retired from the need to fight, the ultimate and hardest-won victory. The film's narrative architecture is built upon a foundation of intentional silence, where unspoken understandings carry more weight than declarative dialogue. This communicative economy transforms every glance and gesture into a potential plot point, demanding acute audience attention to the subtleties of human interaction. McCall's conversations with the village doctor, for instance, are less about medical advice and more about mutual reconnaissance, a quiet assessment of moral character and unuttered trust. The villagers, in turn, communicate their complicity and gratitude through actions, a left-out key, an extra portion of food, a diverted gaze at a crucial moment. This creates a rich subtextual layer where the real plot advances beneath the surface of spoken words, in the silent agreements between people who have chosen their side. Visual motifs of passage and thresholds are relentlessly explored, framing doors, arches, and alleyways as symbols of transition and moral choice. McCall is repeatedly shown in doorways, hesitating on the cusp between his isolated past and integrated future. Each entrance he makes into a home or shop is a small victory of connection, while each exit into the night marks a regression into his operational persona. The climactic confrontation itself takes place in a series of liminal spaces, a bridge, a stairwell, a town gate, emphasizing that this battle is for the rite of passage, for who controls the points of entry and exit into the community's heart. His ultimate victory is symbolized by him finally being inside with the door closed, not outside guarding it. The film presents a sophisticated critique of toxic masculinity through its juxtaposition of McCall against the Camorra. The Quaranta brothers' authority is rooted in performative cruelty, a need to dominate and be seen dominating, which is portrayed as fundamentally weak and insecure. McCall's strength, conversely, is quiet, internalized, and deployed with reluctance. It is a strength in service of protection, not ego. His vulnerability during convalescence, his acceptance of care, and his gentle interactions redefine heroic masculinity as something that encompasses receptivity and nurturing. The film argues that true power does not need to announce itself, and that the most potent form of control is the conscious choice to refrain from violence until it is the only moral option. Recurring imagery of hands serves as a microcosm of character and purpose. We see the skilled, careful hands of the doctor healing, the worn hands of the fisherman working, the gentle hands of a local serving food. McCall's hands are initially still, resting in recovery, then become tools of precise violence, administering a lethal injection, manipulating a weapon. The film tracks his journey through his hands. By the end, they are shown holding a book, grasping a friend's shoulder in greeting, resting peacefully on a table. This visual arc tells the story of a man whose hands have transitioned from instruments of death back to instruments of peaceful, human engagement, completing a powerful symbolic redemption. The atmospheric pressure of the film is meticulously calibrated, shifting from the languid, soporific haze of a sunlit afternoon to the electrically charged stillness before a storm. This atmospheric manipulation is a direct proxy for McCall's subconscious threat detection. The audience learns to read the environment as he does. A quiet piazza feels safe, but the same piazza under a suddenly clouded sky feels ominously still, a vacuum about to be filled with violence. The famous Mediterranean light is thus not just a scenic feature, but a narrative barometer, its quality directly tied to the impending level of danger. The final, clear sunrise after the storm is the ultimate visual release of this built-up pressure. Food and consumption rituals are meticulously staged to illustrate cultural integration and moral standing. The Camorra consumes conspicuously and greedily, their meals noisy affairs of entitlement that disrupt the quiet harmony of the cafes. McCall, in contrast, consumes with respect and attention, his slow sipping of espresso a form of meditation and observation. His acceptance of a home-cooked meal is a sacred contract, an acknowledgement of family. The act of sharing food becomes the antithesis of the Camorra's extraction. It is an exchange that enriches both parties and weaves a social bond. His defense of the town is, in this light, a defense of the right to break bread in peace. The film's philosophical backbone can be seen as a treatise on the ethics of intervention. McCall grapples with the classic outsider's dilemma. Does he have the right to impose his will, even for the town's good, or is that just another form of colonialism? The narrative answers this by showing his intervention is not imposition, but response. He acts only after clearly understanding the community's unspoken plea, and only in ways that empower their own latent resistance. He provides the catalyst, but the chemical reaction belongs to the people of Altamonte. His role is that of a midwife, assisting in the birth of their own liberation rather than delivering it to them fully formed. Musical motifs are employed with surgical precision to blur the line between diegetic sound and emotional score. A folk song played in the piazza might subtly morph into the score's string arrangement, seamlessly merging the real world with the film's emotional perspective. Conversely, the tense electronic hum of McCall's theme might fade into the diegetic drone of a distant boat engine, suggesting his operational mindset is both a part of and a reaction to this environment. This sonic blending creates a deeply immersive experience where the music feels organically born from the setting itself, refusing to allow the audience the comfortable distance of a traditional, separate soundtrack. The concept of legacy is explored not through children, but through influence and example. McCall's legacy with Emma Collins is one of professional integrity and methodological precision. His legacy with the young waiter, Marco, is one of courage and the quiet defense of home. He leaves no biological heir, but he seeds ideas of resistance, of protection, of community that will outlive him. The film suggests that the most enduring legacy is not a bloodline, but the positive disruption one causes in the lives of others, setting them on a better path. McCall's final piece is earned by the knowledge that his influence has been net positive, that he has created more peace than he has destroyed. The choreography of crowd scenes is a masterclass in visual storytelling, illustrating the social dynamics without a word of exposition. In early scenes, townspeople subtly scatter when Camorra members enter the square, their body language speaking of ingrained fear. As McCall's presence becomes a whispered rumor, postures straighten. People hold their ground a moment longer. The final festival scene is the culmination. The crowd initially parts in fear from the approaching threat, then, in a crucial moment, closes ranks, forming a human wall between McCall and his pursuers. This collective movement is the film's most powerful demonstration of turned tides, a societal immune response finally activated against the infection. The treatment of McCall's past is hauntingly elliptical, referenced only through physical scars and behavioral tics. We understand the weight of his history not through flashbacks, but through the profound relief he exhibits in its apparent shedding. His comfort in Altamonte is the comfort of a man who has outrun his own shadow, if only temporarily. The Camorra, in their relentless pursuit, become agents of that past, threatening to drag that shadow back over him. His defeat of them is therefore also a final defeat of the gravitational pull of his own history, a definitive statement that he gets to choose what defines him now, not the ledger of his former life. The film's color grading undergoes a deliberate, almost imperceptible journey. Initial scenes have a slightly desaturated, cooler palette, reflecting McCall's detachment and the lingering clinical feel of his recovery. As he engages, the saturation gently increases. The greens of the hills deepen, the blues of the sea intensify, the terracotta of the roofs warms. This is not a dramatic shift, but a subtle infusion of life and color that mirrors his own sensory re-engagement with the world. The finale basks in this fully realized, vibrant color, as if the victory has not just secured the town, but has permanently corrected the film's very visual perception of it, bathing everything in the golden light of security. The psychology of the bystander is critically examined and ultimately redeemed. The villager's initial inaction is not portrayed as cowardice, but as the rational calculus of the powerless against an entrenched system. McCall's role is to change that calculation, to provide the critical leverage that makes resistance feasible. His actions create a permission structure for courage. This transforms the narrative from a simple savior story into a study in collective empowerment. The true victory is not the death of the villains, but the rebirth of the townspeople's own agency, their transition from a state of passive endurance to active, unified self-defense. Objects are imbued with profound narrative significance, transforming from mundane items into powerful symbols. A simple espresso cup represents the rituals of community McCall seeks to join. A fishing net symbolizes the interconnectedness he is protecting. The Comora's shiny, expensive cars represent their invasive, foreign wealth. McCall's own chosen tools are often repurposed domestic items, a corkscrew, a tool from a workshop, signifying that he is fighting for this world with the materials of this world. This object-oriented storytelling grounds the mythic struggle in tangible reality, making every item on screen a potential player in the moral conflict. Temporal symbolism is anchored in the town's religious festivals, which connect the present struggle to ancient cycles of sacrifice and renewal. McCall's final confrontation is timed to coincide with a patron saint's day, implicitly linking his violent sacrifice to a larger cultural tradition of expiation and protection. He becomes, in a secular sense, the town's patron saint for a night, performing the bloody work that allows the ceremonial, peaceful procession to continue the next day. This alignment elevates his actions from mere crime fighting to the level of mythic ritual, framing him as a necessary, if temporary, monster who battles other monsters so the people can live in light. The film's resolution is deeply satisfying because it fulfills a fundamental narrative promise, that a man of action can earn a quiet life. So many stories end with the hero riding off, forever defined by their capacity for violence. This film dares to show the after, to argue that peace is not a boring endpoint, but the hard-won prize. The final scenes of McCall simply existing, reading, smiling, listening, are the most radical and triumphant in the entire trilogy. They propose that for a certain kind of man, the ultimate heroic act is to successfully retire the hero within, to achieve a state of being where his most remarkable quality is his unremarkable contentment. The film's narrative tension is masterfully sustained not through mystery, but through dramatic irony. The audience possesses full knowledge of McCall's capabilities while the Camorra underestimates him, creating a potent sense of impending, inevitable collision. This structural choice shifts the focus from what will happen to how it will unfold, and at what emotional cost to McCall's fragile new identity. Every polite interaction he has with a villager is tinged with this irony, as we see both the gentle present and the violent future he may need to summon. The Camorra's arrogance becomes their tragic flaw, blinding them to the dormant force residing in their midst, a force they are methodically provoking into wakefulness. This foreknowledge invests even the quietest scenes with a profound, simmering anticipation. McCall's process of intelligence gathering is portrayed as a form of deep cultural immersion, a stark contrast to the sterile data mining of his former intelligence life. He learns not through dossiers but through observation of market prices, changes in fishing yields, and the nervous body language of shopkeepers. This intelligence is lived, not merely collected, connecting him viscerally to the economic and social realities he must defend. His strategic map of the conflict is thus drawn from human experience, not satellite imagery, grounding his campaign in an intimate understanding of the community's pain points. This approach reaffirms the film's central thesis that true protection requires empathy, not just information. The architectural geography of Altamonte is weaponized in the narrative, transforming the town from a passive setting into an active ally. The labyrinthine staircases become channels for flanking maneuvers, the tight alleys nullify numerical advantages, and the open piazza serves as a perfect arena for a final, public reckoning. McCall doesn't just fight in the town. He fights with the town, utilizing its very structure as a force multiplier. This symbiotic relationship visually demonstrates his integration. He is no longer an alien element, but a functioning part of the organism, leveraging its natural defenses. The Camorra, as outsiders, are baffled and defeated by the terrain, their brute force approach rendered clumsy and ineffective. The motif of cleanliness and corruption operates on both a literal and metaphorical level. The Camorra's influence is depicted as a stain, literal grease on a pristine tablecloth, trash dumped in a clean alley. McCall's violence, in turn, is portrayed as a grim form of cleansing, a surgical removal of a contaminant. The frequent shots of washing, hands, steps, cobblestones, after violent events are not just practical but symbolic, representing the community's attempt to restore purity. The final cleansing rain is therefore the ultimate natural ally in this endeavor, a cosmic approval of the purge. McCall's goal is not just safety, but the restoration of a pristine state of being for the place he loves. The film's sound editing carefully delineates the sonic signatures of peace and violence. The auditory landscape of peace is composite and layered. Overlapping conversations, clinking dishes, distant bells, the sigh of the sea. Violence, in contrast, is characterized by stark, isolated sounds. The crisp rack of a slide, the single footfall in an alley, the sharp intake of breath before a strike. This sonic dichotomy teaches the audience to listen like McCall, to hear the disruption in the harmony. His ultimate success is audibly marked not by silence, but by the confident return of the complex, layered soundscape of unabashed daily life, a symphony he has fought to protect. McCall's relationship with time is pathologically patient, a hunter's mentality applied to social repair. He understands that trust cannot be rushed, that integration is measured in months, not moments. This patience is his greatest weapon against the impetuous, short-term greed of the Camorra. They seek immediate tribute. He is playing a long game for a permanent home. His strategic strikes are timed not for his convenience, but for maximum psychological impact on the enemy and minimum disruption to the townsfolk. This temporal mastery showcases a man who has traded the frantic tempo of emergency response for the deliberate rhythm of cultivation, applying a gardener's patience to the messy soil of human conflict. The ethical framework of the film is consciously Manichaean, but this simplicity is a deliberate aesthetic and moral choice. In a world of grays, Altamonte and the Camorra are presented as absolutes. Light versus darkness, nurture versus extraction, community versus predation. This clarity is the source of the film's potent catharsis. It allows the audience to invest fully in the righteousness of the violence without moral ambiguity. This return to a classic moral binary is not naive, but rather a therapeutic narrative device, offering a clear channel for outrage and a satisfying, unambiguous resolution. It fulfills the primal promise of the vigilante genre, that sometimes the world can be made cleanly right through the application of justified force. The use of children and the elderly as narrative touchstones universalizes the stakes of the conflict. They represent the vulnerable past and the defenseless future of the community, the very reasons why abstract principles like justice must become concrete action. McCall's protective gaze often rests on them, framing his mission as the defense of innocence itself. Their eventual, unguarded smiles and interactions with him post-victory are the truest measure of his success. They are the most sensitive barometers of safety. By securing their peace, he symbolically secures the continuum of life in Altamonte, ensuring its culture and spirit will be passed down unpolluted. The film subtly interrogates the very concept of retirement for a man whose identity is synonymous with a skill set. Can one truly retire from being a world-class violinist, or does the music simply remain dormant within? McCall's retirement is not an erasure, but a repurposing. The discipline, observation, and strategic thinking are redirected from hostile surveillance to community integration, from planning raids to planning a peaceful day. The film suggests that such a man doesn't lose his edge. He simply changes the stone on which he sharpens it. His final state is not one of dullness, but of focused tranquility, all his formidable capacities now oriented toward the simple, profound task of living well. Clothing and costume again serve as a subtle language, particularly in the depiction of the Camorra. Their expensive, label-conscious suits and sharp tailoring are armor of a different kind, meant to project power and intimidate. They are uniforms of entitlement. McCall's eventual adoption of simple, functional, local attire is a sartorial surrender to authenticity, a rejection of that performative power. He chooses comfort and belonging over intimidation. This visual transformation is a public declaration of his chosen allegiance, making him indistinguishable from the people he protects and signaling to the Camorra that he is now of this soil and will defend it as his own. The element of water completes its symbolic journey from a threatening, drowning medium in the opening to a purifying, life-giving one at the end. Initially, McCall is pulled from the sea near death, a victim of its langueur. By the finale, the rain washes the violence from the stones, and the sea resumes its role as a serene, rhythmic backdrop. He is shown enjoying a drink of water, calmly watching the waves. This arc symbolizes his mastery over the chaotic elements of his life. He has passed through the storm and now exists in harmony with the water, no longer its victim, but a contented observer of its beauty. The element has been transformed, as has he, from a threat into a source of peace. The narrative function of the local carabinieri station, often absent or ineffectual, serves to highlight the film's central philosophical argument about justice. Institutional authority is portrayed as either corrupted, outgunned, or hamstrung by procedure. This vacuum is what creates the ecological niche for a McCall. His intervention is presented not as a rejection of law, but as its fulfillment in a context where the official mechanisms have failed. He operates as a one-man natural disaster against man-made corruption, a force that exists outside the broken system to restore the conditions under which the system could theoretically function again. He is the reset button, not the permanent government. The cinematography's perspective frequently aligns with McCall's, but crucially, it also frequently pulls back to a god's-eye view of the town. These aerial or high-angle shots serve as visual reminders of what is at stake: the entire, intricate, beautiful organism of Altamonte. They contextualize his street-level actions within the larger tapestry he is preserving. This oscillation between subjective intimacy and objective grandeur elevates the story from a personal vendetta to a geopolitical micro-operation. We see both the determined look in his eye and the panoramic view of the paradise he is determined to save, binding the personal to the epic. The treatment of McCall's sleep, or lack thereof, is a minor but telling character note. Early on, he is often shown awake at night, a silhouette at his window, the insomniac habits of a lifetime of vigilance hard to break. As he begins to feel at home, we see him sleeping peacefully, if lightly. In the final act, the insomnia returns, a sign that his operational persona has been fully re-engaged. The film's true ending, therefore, is implied in the final scenes where he dozes in the sun in the piazza. He has achieved the ability to rest deeply, openly, and vulnerably in the heart of his community. This is the ultimate sign of trust and safety, the final gift he gives himself. The film's emotional core is meticulously constructed around the principle of earned intimacy, where vulnerability becomes a form of strategic and personal strength. McCall's acceptance of medical care and shelter is a calculated surrender that ultimately grants him a deeper intelligence and moral authority than any covert infiltration could achieve. This foundational vulnerability disarms the community's natural defenses, allowing for genuine connections to form without the shadow of his formidable reputation. His gradual participation in local rituals is never performative, but always observational first, a student learning the grammar of a new language of belonging. Each small exchange, a correct greeting or a return tool, functions as a spoken syllable in his declaration of citizenship, building toward the fluent sentence of his final, peaceful presence. Economic subtext provides a sophisticated layer to the conflict, framing it as a war between two opposing models of value. The Camorra operates on a crude extractive capitalism, seeing Altamonte's beauty and peace merely as untapped resources for monetary gain. McCall, in stark contrast, engages in a restorative economy, investing his own human capital, his skills, his risk, his attention, with no expectation of financial return. His currency is security, and his dividend is the preservation of a way of life that exists outside market valuation. The film cleverly visualizes this through the Camorra's flashy, invasive assets versus the town's rooted, functional ones, making the moral argument that some forms of wealth are inherently destructive while others are inherently generative. The psychological landscape of surveillance is inverted from McCall's past life. Where he was once the hidden watcher in a hostile urban jungle, in Altamonte he is both the observed and the benign observer. The community's gentle, curious gaze upon him is a form of social vetting, a collective unconscious assessment of his character. He, in turn, watches over them not as targets or assets, but as charges in his newly adopted ecosystem. This reciprocal observation creates a network of mutual, nonverbal accountability, a silent web of care that stands in direct opposition to the Comora's network of fear. His victory is achieved when the community's gaze shifts from wary acceptance to open, protective solidarity, visually culminating in them watching his back during the climax. The film employs a sophisticated vocabulary of touch to chart the protagonist's emotional thaw. The initial, clinical touch of Dr. Enzo dressing his wound establishes a necessary, professional intimacy. This progresses to the functional, communal touches of daily life, a hand accepting change, a shoulder brushed past in a narrow street. The pivotal moments are touches of deliberate, human connection, a hand placed on his arm in gratitude, or his own hand finally resting on another's shoulder in a gesture of reassurance. Each point of contact is a brick in the bridge he builds back to humanity, moving from the passive receipt of care to the active offering of comfort, completing his circuit back into the human community. Temporal symbolism is deeply embedded in the film's use of daily and seasonal cycles. McCall arrives in what seems like perpetual summer, a season of abundance and outdoor life that mirrors his potential for growth. The Comora's escalation brings a metaphorical winter, a time of contraction and threat, testing the community's resilience. His final confrontation coincides with an autumn storm, a season of cleansing and transition, of stripping away the dead to make way for new growth. The promise of the ending is a return to an eternal, secure summer, a state he has fought to make permanent. His personal timeline is thus synced with the agrarian rhythms of his new home, his redemption arc following the natural order of death and rebirth. The cinematography's focus on manual labor and craft serves as a visual mantra for the film's philosophy. We see hands shaping dough, mending nets, painting wood, arranging flowers. These acts of creation and repair are presented as sacred, the fundamental opposite of the acts of destruction McCall must temporarily revisit. His own meticulous preparations are filmed with the same respect, framing his violence as a terrible but necessary form of societal repair. The film posits that whether one is fixing a boat or excising a cancer, the ethos is the same, a careful, skilled application of effort to restore wholeness. McCall's journey is to move from the latter, grim expertise back into the world of the former, to become a creator and maintainer rather than a destroyer. The acoustic geography of the film is carefully mapped to reflect sovereignty. In spaces controlled by the community, the cafe, the church, the piazza during festa, sound is organic, layered, and harmonious. In spaces invaded or controlled by the Comora, sound becomes harsh, monolithic, and intrusive. The blare of a car stereo, the aggressive ringtone of a phone, the smash of breaking glass. McCall's operational mode is characterized by near silence, the suppression of sound to avoid detection. His integration is marked by his comfortable presence within the community's soundscape, no longer needing to exist in a sonic vacuum. The restoration of Altamonte's auditory signature is therefore a key indicator of its liberation. The motif of the table is central to the film's discourse on community and power. The Comora uses tables as sites of intimidation for shakedowns, transforming a symbol of gathering into one of extortion. The community's tables in homes and the cafe are places of sharing, debate, and fellowship. McCall's progression from eating alone to being invited to a family table to finally sitting at the communal table in the piazza is the story of his acceptance. The final image of him at a table, reading, is the ultimate reclamation of the symbol. A table is now a place of personal, peaceful engagement, no longer a fortress or a bargaining chip, but a simple piece of furniture in a free town. The film's treatment of history is palpable yet unseen, a ghost in the sunlit streets. Altamonte's history is in its stones, its traditions, its family names, a deep, slow history that gives weight to the present. The Comora has a shallow, transactional history of immediate gains and brutal enforcements. McCall's own history is the specter he is outrunning, a history of shadows and violence that has no place in this sunlit chronology. His battle is thus for the right to have a future that is not dictated by his past, to write his next chapter on the ancient, resilient parchment of Altamonte's timeline. By defeating the Comora, he defeats the force that would commodify the town's history, and finally earns the right to add his own peaceful footnote to its long story. The concept of home undergoes a final, profound refinement. For McCall, home was never a location, but a state of moral alignment. The diner was a home for the dispossessed. Altamonte offers the chance for home to be both a place and a state, a physical and spiritual congruence. His defense of it is the ultimate test of this concept. If home can be attacked, it must be defensible. If it can be defended successfully, it becomes truly sacred. The film concludes that home is not a passive inheritance, but an active creation, a pact between a person and a place, forged in shared vulnerability and solidified in mutual protection. He is not coming home. He is, through deliberate action, building one from the foundation up. The film's philosophical stance is ultimately one of qualified optimism, asserting that while evil may be a recurring feature of the human condition, the capacity for communal resistance and individual redemption is equally persistent. McCall does not eradicate evil from the world. He creates a durable sanctuary where its most virulent local strain is permanently neutralized. This micro-victory is presented as both sufficient and profoundly meaningful, a testament to the power of focused intent over grand, unachievable designs. The sanctuary of Altamonte becomes a working model of peace, its continued existence a quiet argument for the possibility of harmony in a discordant world. McCall's retirement within its borders is thus an active, living thesis on the achievability of grace. Narrative symbolism is powerfully concentrated in the film's treatment of keys and locks, representing agency over one's own space. The Camorra operates by forcing locks, both literal and metaphorical, asserting their right of access everywhere. McCall, in his early days, is a man without a key, dependent on the goodwill of others to open doors for him. His pivotal moment of acceptance is marked by being given a key, a tangible symbol of trust and belonging. The final act sees him using his skills not to pick locks, but to secure them, to bar the door against the invading threat. This journey from lockpicker to keyholder to guardian of the threshold perfectly encapsulates his arc from outsider to integrated protector. The film's emotional intelligence is demonstrated in its handling of gratitude, which flows in multiple, unspoken directions. The townspeople are grateful for McCall's protection, but he is equally, if not more, grateful for their initial uncalculated gift of salvation and community. This complex web of mutual obligation is never verbally dissected, but is felt in every glance and gesture. It avoids the simplistic savior narrative by establishing that he was saved first, creating a debt of honor that his violent expertise allows him to repay in kind. This reciprocal dynamic elevates their relationship from transactional to symbiotic, a shared investment in a common future, where the ledger of sacrifice is balanced and then closed. Visual contrasts between movement and stillness define the psychological states of hunter and prey. The Camorra, when agitated, move with aggressive, jangling energy, their motions loud and predictable. McCall, especially when operating, moves with a preternatural stillness that explodes into brief, fluid, and decisive motion. This controlled economy of movement communicates a supreme confidence and efficiency that is far more intimidating than bluster. In his peaceful moments, his stillness becomes different, a contented, relaxed repose, the stillness of a watchful lion at rest, not a predator coiled to strike. The film uses this physical grammar to tell us everything about his internal state without a single line of dialogue. The ethical resolution of the trilogy is found in its rejection of endless cyclical violence. McCall's final campaign is designed not just to win, but to conclusively end the conflict, to break the cycle of retaliation. He achieves this through totality. He removes the entire structure, leaving no lieutenants hungry for revenge, no sons seeking vengeance. This comprehensive approach is presented as the only moral one for a man seeking permanent peace. It acknowledges that half measures beget future violence, and that true sanctuary requires a definitive, if grim, finality. His retirement is therefore ethically earned because he has ensured no ghost from this battle will come knocking on Altamonte's door. The film's use of natural light as a narrative deadline is a masterstroke of tension. The creeping progression of sunlight across a floor or the lengthening of shadows becomes a silent clock, measuring the time until a confrontation or the window for safe action. McCall often plans around these natural cycles, using the cover of night or the distraction of high noon. This ties his actions to the primordial rhythms of the earth, framing his conflict as something ancient and fundamental. The final confrontation, concluding at dawn, leverages the symbolic power of sunrise as a new beginning, the literal light after darkness, affirming that the natural order has been defended and will proceed. Character exposition is achieved through environmental interaction rather than biographical revelation. We understand McCall's respect for order by watching him neatly arrange his few belongings in the small room. We see his ingrained vigilance in how he always chooses a seat with a view of the entrance. We learn of his growing affection in the care he takes returning a borrowed item or his attention to a child's lost toy. The town, in turn, reveals its character in how it maintains its public spaces, how it rallies around a grieving family, how it stubbornly celebrates in the face of fear. This show-don't-tell methodology builds a deeply immersive world where psychology is etched into action and setting. The motif of the spectator is central to McCall's initial role and his transformation. He begins as the ultimate spectator, watching the life of the town from a literal and figurative distance, a connoisseur of normalcy he feels he can never join. His shift to participant is hesitant, moving from the edge of the frame to its center in social gatherings. By the climax, he is both spectacle and protector, the man upon whom every eye is cast, not as a curiosity but as their champion. In the end, he relinquishes both roles, no longer a watched protector or a watching outsider, but simply another face in the crowd, his spectator days over, his life finally lived within, not apart from, the frame. The sound of silence is weaponized to profound effect, distinguishing the silence of peace from the silence of dread. The peaceful silence of Altamonte is full and rich, underpinned by the distant sea and rustling leaves, a comfortable, inhabited quiet. The dread silence that falls when Camorra cars appear is a vacuum, a sucking away of sound and life. McCall's own stealth operates in this vacuum, using the enemy's created silence against them. The film's audio design teaches us to fear the wrong kind of quiet, making the eventual, glorious return of the town's gentle, noisy cacophony the most satisfying sound in the film, the audible signature of victory. The final image transcends closure to achieve a state of poetic permanence. McCall is not frozen in action, but captured in a loop of peaceful, mundane activity that implies an endless, untroubled future. The composition is open, the light is warm and lasting, and his posture is one of unguarded immersion. It suggests not just an ending, but a beginning, the first day of the rest of a very long, quiet life. This image refuses the melodrama of farewell, offering instead the gentle profundity of continuity. It assures us that the story is not stopping, but happily continuing in a realm beyond our observation, that the Equalizer has finally been equalized by the very peace he wrought.